Now I don't want
So anyone can feel free to say anything, but so
Thank
you. What did what were we just handed?
This is a picture of a famous martyr in the war.
In the War of Holy Defense.
That's right.
So tell us where we are right now. I mean, we're in one of the most significant places in this country.
This is the Tehran cemetery, the most important cemetery, where most people who pass away are still buried here. And this part of the cemetery is where the martyrs are buried, the war martyrs, the martyrs who fought against the Israelis, who fought against ISIS and Al-Qaeda. The bulk of the martyrs are, of course, those who were in the war between Iran and Iraq.
Yeah.
Usually there are large crowds on Thursdays because it's the weekend, Thursday afternoon, evening. Now most have left. And Friday mornings.
So how many people were here? How many people typically come on Thursday night?
I don't know the numbers.
Thousands.
Yeah, many. Yeah, tens of thousands.
Tens of thousands.
They come and go because there are many families. There are many people who just come. And on religious holidays, it becomes very crowded, like maybe in the hundreds of thousands, if not over a million.
So what is the
very special holidays, like during Ramadan, during the special nights, it becomes extremely crowded here. All of this area is just full of people, packed, sitting and praying. Everywhere.
Can you explain the emotional and spiritual potency of this site to people who come here on Thursday night? I mean, what does it mean to them?
Well, many of the people, like here, this is one of the older areas. And many of these people here many of them, not all of them, were martyred during the revolution. They were gunned down on the streets of Tehran by the Shah's army. So a lot of them, this is like the older part of the area. So, and behind this are where some of the commanders of the war are also buried. And so people, these are people who made the greatest sacrifices. Their families made great sacrifices. So their parents or their spouses are buried here as well. They have special places for them. They are revered. They are if you'd come a couple of hours earlier, it would have been very crowded. You see how they're dismantling some of the things that they put together for tonight for the program. They give tea, and people would walk and have tea and then go to the different martyrs whom they may be related to, or just walk around and visit the graves of like well-known martyrs.
But is it? I mean, it's an observance of history and the revolution that many of these people fell at a time when the fate of the revolution was uncertain, that the country could be overwhelmed, and cities were occupied by Iraq. There was the war on the cities, and there were so many deaths during that period. I mean, how much does that history mean today, as Iran is threatened now with war from the U.S.?
Well, for example, you recall when General Soleimani was murdered by Trump, and there's a picture of him up there. He was very popular.
Yeah.
In the polls that Americans and Western institutions carried out, he was like 90%, had a 90% popular support. When he was martyred, there were millions on the streets in Tehran.
Yeah.
He wasn't even buried here. He was taken to his hometown. And so that just shows how, how these people are viewed among ordinary Iranians. And during Ramadan, when people are fasting, during those holy nights, this is not a place where they would normally have ceremonies. People on their own gathered here.
Yeah.
So in different parts of the cemetery, you have different religious ceremonies being held by different people, but it's sort of like it was a spontaneous thing. This here became popular without anyone promoting it. I just found out, for example, I came a few times with family. I just found out that such a phenomenon existed like a few years ago.
Really?
Yeah, and when you'd come, and now it's more organized.
Yeah.
But literally, I think probably among over 1 million people were here during last Ramadan.
Really?
Yeah, you couldn't get in. It was like it took us hours just to get into the complex.
And it's a signal of support for the whole concept of resistance throughout the region.
Yes, because these are martyrs. So these are some of the میخوایم از اینجا بریم. So these are some of the martyrs who played a key role during the first couple of years in the war. So when Saddam invaded, the army wasn't ready because a lot of people who were conscripts, they fled the army during the revolution.
Yeah.
And many of the senior commanders they fled the country, those who were, and a lot of them were just removed. A few were executed, those who committed mass murder, but the army wasn't ready. The Revolutionary Guards back then was very small. It wasn't, they weren't well armed.
Yeah.
So Saddam invaded the country, and many young people just joined as volunteers. They joined the guards as volunteer forces. And so a lot of the people here are either those who were killed on the streets of Tehran during the revolution, and others were the first wave of revolutionaries who were defending the country. And of course, army personnel, officers, Air Force pilots, naval forces. So this particular person, he was my first commander. I actually became his radio man.
Really?
Yeah.
What was his name?
Komail. We would call him Komail, but his name is Komail Mirzazadeh. I was his radio man when he was martyred. I wasn't with him when he was martyred. He had 3 radio men. I was one of them. But at the time that he was martyred, I was one of his radio men.
Can you describe the battle? And
it was in Saddam Hussein supported terrorist groups and Kurdish separatist groups in Iranian Kurdish areas. He was the commander of the Bukhan area, and so we were liberating a road between Bukhan and another city, and his car was targeted. This person, Bagheri, he is the brother of the current commander of the armed forces.
Oh, okay.
He was a key person in the initial victories in the war, when Saddam's forces were being pushed back. I say Saddam forces because I don't like calling them Iraqi forces. It was a regime that had imposed itself on the Iraqi people. And if you know, I've been to Iraq during ISIS, and I was with Iraqi forces when they liberated areas in the north, and I was with them when they liberated Mosul, and the relationship between Iraqis and Iranians, and Hezbollah, because Hezbollah was there. They were they were training the Iraqis, they were fighting with them, and so were the Iranians. The relationship was always excellent.
Why did you fight?
I didn't fight. I went, just like when I'd go to Syria or
Yeah,
I'd go to Lebanon, I'd go to sort of be there to see what was going on.
No, I meant why you
I never
fought in the army.
in the Iran.
I meant
again,
generally speaking.
defending. I was a volunteer. I wasn't in the army.
Right.
So,
So you were not conscripted.
no. I was a
So you fought out of ideological
yeah.
desire.
Yeah.
But what were you and other volunteers fighting for?
Well, Iran was invaded. The West and the Soviet Union, both blocs, were supporting Saddam Hussein, and he was carrying out atrocities with their funding from Arab governments in the Persian Gulf as well. And so I was one of many volunteers. I was 16 when I first volunteered, then I joined the Guards as a Basij member, sort of like the Popular Mobilization Forces in Iraq, or the volunteers in Hezbollah. Actually, one of my close friends is martyred. If you want, we can walk. We can go there. So he was my first commander, but I wasn't there when he was martyred.
All right.
These are some of the most famous. Dr. Chamran, he was very famous. Many of these people are they're household names. Like they in this in the whole area, all the small streets they are named after different places in the war fronts. Like Susangir is the name of a city that was occupied. Where they committed huge atrocities there.
Yeah.
So a lot of people on this side, they were gunned down in Tehran. He was one of my very close friends, and he was martyred in front of me. We were military divers when he was martyred. This was the Kabbalah 5 operations. Actually, if you see my profile picture, that's, I think, I'm not quite sure, but yeah, see, this is my profile picture. This is him.
So describe the operation.
Well, these were all military divers. He was martyred. Both in front of me. He was martyred later, and he was also martyred. Their graves are actually close by. Whenever I come, I go. That's me. A bit thinner than now. That he was martyred. His grave is nearby. He was. This is him. Reza Farhangi. And he was martyred. He's close by. He's close by too. He was martyred, but he's buried in another city.
So
and that's me.
So this is one unit.
Yeah, this is.
Or kind of like a platoon kind of.
This is like a daste. I don't know how to translate it.
Just say it.
But it's the smallest unit, daste.
Okay, and so what percentage was lost?
The martyrs and the Kabbalah 5 operation was the heaviest fighting in the war, and they had the heaviest fighting. So, but two of these people were not martyred during this operation. They were martyred later. But these 3 people were martyred in front of me during the operation. And so, I mean, literally in front of me.
So can you describe the operation? I mean, what was the?
We crossed the Shalamche Lake and attacked Saddam's forces to the east of Basra, the city of Basra. And we established a beachhead. And then after we were able to, with a lot of difficulty and martyrs, make that place, secure that area, then reinforcements came in.
And so, I mean, this was inside Iraqi territory,
this is literally, he was literally martyred. Because I've been there, like on the border after the war, because people go there for the Iranian New Year. It's massive crowds go there to the areas on the border, to see the places where the battles took place. He is, I think, was martyred 10 meters inside Iraq.
That was a turning point in the war.
The Battle of Karbala 5 was, during that battle, the UN Security Council passed Resolution 598. So it took them almost 6 years to pass a resolution which met Iran's minimal requirements.
Right.
Iran didn't reject it, it didn't accept it at that time, because Iran wanted the aggressor to be named in the first part of the resolution, but they put it like in the later. But then more than a year later, I think Iran accepted the resolution.
And back to like losing.
So if we didn't have Operation Karbala 5, we would not have had this Resolution 598, through which peace was ultimately established. Because the UN was siding with Iraq.
Yeah.
I mean, even when chemical weapons were being used.
You mean the Security Council?
The UN Security Council, yeah. So the UN Security Council would not condemn Saddam. It would not declare, for example, that he was using chemical weapons. It never said that his forces were attacked Iran, invaded the country. They were always careful not to do anything that would be evidence that Iran was a victim.
And
do you want to gradually walk?
Yeah, and losing them.
General Soleimani was also a key commander in the Karbala 5 operations.
What was his role?
He was leading a Lashkar Mishe battalion. He was leading a battalion. I was in a different battalion.
So how did you cope with losing so many friends? Was it that the battle was a success and that they fell in a victorious battle that helped?
You know, I began fighting when I was 16. So I began losing friends since I was 16, and I was almost 22 when the war ended. So over the years, I kept losing friends. So it's something you have to live with.
I mean, very rare for us in the U.S. with this obviously sort of fantasy guarantee of total security to cope with losing friends. Did you lose something inside yourself, a sensitivity to death?
No, whenever I see war, that's one reason why I kept going to Syria. I keep going to Lebanon or Iraq, because I'm sensitive about war. It's something that, the injustice of what the United States has done to our region, to our people, whether it's in Syria through a dirty war, whether it's in Lebanon through the Zionist regime, whether it's in Iraq through ISIS and Al-Qaeda. All of these are things that, for me, are very, like many others, it pains me because it's a repetition of what we've been going through for many decades. Yeah,
I think something I just being here for several days, going to dinner and realizing I'm next door to, for example, the tomb of Mohsen Fakhrizadeh, the Oppenheimer of Iran, who was assassinated by Israel, or seeing all of these graves, just this vast landscape of graves. You see so much sacrifice has been made here for what people consider to be their independence, and now they're being threatened with war again, and it's like a negotiating tactic by Trump. Like, I'll kill you.
Yeah, we'll kill you.
I'll rain 20,000-pound mother of all bombs on your heads unless you agree to my terms. But it's so clear that so much sacrifice has already been made. Do you think that?
And
yeah.
all of these deaths are directly a result of U.S. policy. All of these.
You blame the U.S. for all of this.
All of this, yeah.
But do you think the administration in Washington understands the sacrifice that's already been made?
I don't think they care.
No.
They don't see us as. I mean, when you look at Gaza, when you look at the barbaric bombings in Lebanon, when they targeted Dahia, you've been to Dahia.
Yeah.
How they would just target apartment blocks and Western journalists based in Beirut. They had their cameramen were Lebanese, their fixers were Lebanese, their drivers were Lebanese, their producers were Lebanese.
Yeah.
They knew these were just ordinary apartment blocks.
Yeah.
But the reports that would come out from Lebanon was
Hezbollah
strongholds, Hezbollah sites, Hezbollah targets, in order to legitimize the targeting of families and the mass slaughter of families and the targeting of their property and destroying the homes of tens of thousands of people in Dahi alone.
Yeah.
So when you see that, I mean, that's what I saw. I've never been to Gaza, but what you see in Gaza is far worse.
Yeah.
So what is ongoing in Gaza, we see what's happening. So they don't care now. So why would they care about all these martyrs here in Tehran? So these were young men, and some of these were our families too. If you go among the graves, you'll see women and children, and they were those who were killed as a result of airstrikes or missile strikes. And the U.S. and their proxies in the region, Saudi Arabia and Kuwait, and all of them were funding Saddam, and Germany was providing Saddam with chemical weapons. And the only country that supported Iran was Syria.
Yeah.
They were the only ones who were opposed to this aggression among all the countries, and they helped Iran a lot.
They provided missile technology to help.
They provided different things. The most important thing that they did was they stopped an oil pipeline that went through Syria. Iraq was exporting oil through Syria, and that was a sacrifice. I mean, Iran did help Syria,
Yeah.
but the cost that they paid by shutting down that pipeline
Yeah.
was much greater than anything Iran did for Syria.
Yeah. Which helps explain why Syria was targeted so ferociously.
Oh yeah, I mean, Syria was targeted first and foremost because that's what Israel wanted.
Yeah.
And they used every tool in their toolbox, whether it was sectarianism, racial hatred, anything to justify what they were doing to Syria. I'd been to Syria many times, and between 2000 and, well, before the Dirty War, I regularly travel, but after it started from 2013, you want to watch out behind you? Yeah. So from early 2013 till literally a few weeks before the fall of Syria, I'd go there 2, 3, 4 times a year. So Syria, yeah, it was targeted because it had to go, just like any country that's near Israel. And so Qatar and Saudi Arabia and Turkey, all of them being in the American camp, they conspired to destroy the country. Jordan, Israel, of course.
They brought the organization responsible for 9/11 to power, and Emmanuel Macron just went and met its longtime leader. And
I tweeted, ISIS goes home, or ISIS comes home. You know, Alistair Crook, you saw him this morning.
Yeah.
Alistair, in late 2011, I lived in Lebanon that year. I was on sabbatical in Beirut. And it started when the Dirty War started when I was there. Alistair told me in Beirut, he said, I don't recall the exact words, but he said basically that this is a dirty war.
Yeah.
And I said, how do you know? And he said, all the people who I knew in Pakistan in the 1980s
Yeah.
who were involved,
Yeah.
they are now in Istanbul. He told me this in 2011. Iranian intelligence and all these people were saying the same, but of course in the West they were saying, the Western media was saying these are conspiracy theories and that sort of nonsense. But Alistair told me this personally in late 2011 in Beirut.
Yeah. Oh,
and Alistair, by the way, got really punished because of Syria, because he became a truth teller, and he had a think tank. He was doing pretty well.
Everyone who told the truth about Syria was punished on some level in the West, and I mean, I think the backlash I got was more harsh than what I got for turning against Zionism.
And by the way, and also Iran, Flint and Hillary Leverett, who you may know, they started writing. I mean, Hillary's Jewish.
Yeah.
And both worked in the White House.
Yeah.
And they wrote a book going to Tehran. And they wrote some articles about Iran. And they were hammered.
Oh, yeah. I remember it. The neocons were obsessed with them because they were credible people who were actual Iran experts who
worked in the White House.
Who worked in the White House and the NSC, and who were willing to entertain the idea of Iran not being destroyed by regime change.
And not being an enemy.
Being accepted sort of as it is. And that's unacceptable. A real expert is unacceptable in Washington. You have to be an ideologue with a lanyard. So, I mean, I think we're in a pivotal point right now after October 7th. It's not me saying it, it's Netanyahu saying it. He's saying, you know, we've cut off the hands of Iran in the region. We have destroyed, Syria's fallen.
In his dreams, Hajj Ali Akbar Fulad, when his wife was pregnant and she lost her child when she found out that he was martyred. He and I both went to Hajj pilgrimage months before he was martyred. I didn't know him. We met as volunteers when this is him. Standing beside me. That's these two. And then I'll just show you one more now. There are lots, but watch out here.
How often do you visit?
Depends. Depends. Sometimes it's very difficult because it gets very crowded on Thursday. So that if the roads are too crowded, congested, I just don't come, or I turn back. Because this is the biggest, this is Tehran Cemetery, so it's not just the martyrs. People come here for their family members. And this is a picture that he has with me. See? They cut me out of the picture.
So you're right there.
Yeah, I'm in the picture, I'm here. It's the two of us. That's life.
Yeah. Why do you think you lived and the man standing next to you didn't?
That's what God willed. That's what God wants. It's not for me to say. One day we'll find out.
Yeah.
One day we'll find out.
God needed someone to shut down BBC presenters.
Yeah, I truly believe in this sort of thing. There's a reason why, for example, a Jew stands up to the Secretary of State and says, "You're destroying my religion." There's a reason why someone like me,
Well, there's a reason why you developed a certain fearlessness, or some would even say reckless abandon, to confront power. A lot of people might be intimidated by a Western media presenter who's so polished and has so many talking points to throw at you. But you've been sort of a singular force from this country, and being able to overcome the propaganda. I mean, I think that's what you're known for in my country.
I don't, you know, I don't fear them, because the worst that he could do is just, what can he do to me? He can try to humiliate me, or to, you know, all these people have died. I have a responsibility. You have a responsibility. We all have a responsibility to do what's right.
Is that what it is? You feel a responsibility to?
Yeah, that's the only reason I do it. It's the only reason I do it. Otherwise, I'd rather go and just teach and live my life. I don't like being on television fighting with these people or being attacked or accused. It's not, I don't think you take pleasure in people antagonizing you, but you feel someone has to do it. If we don't do it, then who's going to do it?
So is it revenge in a way?
No, I think it's just defending the oppressed, the abused, the marginalized.
For me, it was kind of revenge, confronting Blinken, because it was the only thing I could do. I had the ability to be in the room.
Yeah, but you could just be quiet. You could just live your life.
I couldn't just live my life, so
because
I couldn't live with myself.
Yeah, but exactly. So it's not just revenge. It's a principle. It's a series of principles. If you don't know all these people in Gaza, you've never met 99.9. No, you've been there, but you know a few of them. You can just turn away. You can condemn them and just move on.
Yeah.
But you can't. You feel you can't live with yourself, because you know you have a responsibility. When it came to Syria, I felt I had a responsibility. When it came to Iraq, when it came to Syria, Lebanon, Yemen, you and I have, you know, and others like us, many. Like those students who protest. Families of the martyrs, they have special passes.
Yeah.
So they can bring in their cars.
Okay.
They're enjoying themselves. Yeah, there are lots. We can go on for hours here. The weather's nice.
I would say that much of the death that I've been confronted with, I mean, my grandfather fought in a war and is buried in a cemetery, Arlington National Cemetery, but it has a different meaning to Americans than this does to Iranians. It doesn't have the connotation of self-defense the same way this does.
You know, because of the culture of Imam Hussein and Karbala and the grandson of the Prophet fighting against the oppressor of his era, and the fact that he was supporting the oppressed and he wouldn't submit to oppression, and he was martyred along with his companions. That has a huge impact on Iranian culture, huge impact, just like in Hezbollah and elsewhere. So these martyrs, they are looked upon as people who follow the footsteps of the grandson of the Prophet and his companions, and they stood up against injustice, wherever it is, you know.
Yeah.
So whether the martyrs are in Lebanon or in perhaps Yemen or Syria or Afghanistan or anywhere else, they are seen in that context. So the culture of Ashura, the day when Imam Hussein was martyred, is very has a huge impact on Iranian society.
Do you think that's given Iranian society a greater ability to withstand the blows of empire?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
And do you think more blows are coming in the near future?
The war? Yeah, I don't see this ending anytime soon. I think as long as you have Israel, this is going to continue. As long as you have this ethno-supremacist regime, which is not even an ethnicity, but anyway. But as long as you have, you know, the empire pouring in money and weapons to slaughter in this region, yeah, it's not going to stop. It's not going to end anytime soon.
So you think war is
Watch
coming behind you? You think war is coming in the near future?
I don't know exactly what that means. I don't know what, how this is going to play out. But I think we are going to have violence for quite a while. It may increase and decrease, but as long as the Israeli regime exists, there won't be peace in this region.
Yeah, I mean,
It's like apartheid South Africa. As long as, resistance against, whether it was the ANC or any of the other groups, or whether it was in what is now Zimbabwe or the frontline states, there was never going to be peace as long as there was a white supremacist regime. It's just impossible because people are going to resist. Sometimes the resistance may gain strength, sometimes the resistance may weaken. The cemetery is huge. It's very big, by the way, but if you want to go back in, we can. But
yeah, we'll go back in. But Netanyahu's kind of framing this as a special window in which war should occur, war in Iran, because
he'll lose. If there's war, the U.S. will lose, and if there's a war, Israel will lose. In any conventional war, the United States and Israel cannot defeat Iran or the resistance, and they are just fooling themselves if they think otherwise. They've been saying that about Russia in Ukraine. How Russia's losing and how they're.
I mean, the U.S. has failed in Yemen. It was supposed to be sort of a testing ground.
We knew
for
that it
Iran.
was going to happen. They didn't even succeed in Lebanon. The Israelis sought a ceasefire. It wasn't Hezbollah that asked for a ceasefire. Hezbollah took heavy blows, but they still prevented the Israelis from taking a single town. Only after the ceasefire, in violation of the ceasefire terms, did the Israelis move in and take territory. And then ordinary people went, and at heavy cost, many women were murdered by the Israelis, but they pushed the Israelis out of most of those areas. In Gaza too, in Yemen, and I don't see the Israeli regime having had any success. The only place where they succeeded was in Syria. But even there, I've been saying that it's not going to end well for them because, in a sense, the burden of Syria has been removed from the shoulders of the Iranians because Iran was paying for people, for people to survive under those circumstances. And ever since it fell, those who were behind ISIS and Al-Qaeda have done nothing for the Syrians. The situation there now is much worse than it was before. No one's doing anything for Syrians, and we see how much land the Israelis have taken, and we see how Jolani, as we expected, we were absolutely certain that Jolani, the first thing he would do would be move towards Israel, because that was the whole objective in the first place. The U.S. would never support a dirty war in Syria if it wasn't to help Israel.
Yeah.
It was impossible. So ISIS and Al-Qaeda, as you know, and I think you've written about, they controlled the areas alongside the Golan Heights, the Syrian Golan, occupied by the Israelis. And they were funded by the Israelis. They were supported by the Israelis.
Moshe Ya'alon said, "I prefer ISIS there to the Syrian Arab army."
And their injured were treated by the Israelis. And whenever the Syrian army would try to take back that territory, they would bomb them, they would shell them, helicopter gunships would target them. It was obvious what these groups were all about. But the power of propaganda, whether it's from these Arab oil and gas-rich dictatorships or the Western media, was immense. And back then, we didn't have alternative media the way we do have now. And I'm not saying alternative media is all good, but at least now you have spreading the news is much, spreading information is very different from back then. So young people who now are more politically aware, the previous generation didn't have the sort of opportunities that they have now to get that sort of alternative worldview.
Yeah, and I mean, mainstream media in the West is discredited, so
Oh, yeah, utterly,
people-
utterly.
turning to other sources. But I wanted to ask you on the topic of war, since war is always looming. You know, a lot of people say Iran, by not enacting True Promise 3, has sacrificed its deterrence. Iran has lost so much of its leadership to Israel's assassination program, and we saw Hassan Nasrallah and Hisham Safadine be cut down as well, almost in like the course of a few hours. So like
A few days, yeah.
the few days.
I was there when
They-
Sayyid Hassan was martyred. I was in Beirut. I was a few hundred meters away from the place.
Yeah.
I was in a Saha hotel.
Yeah, and I saw you there at the site of it. Why hasn't Iran?
Yeah, for the funeral.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Why hasn't Iran done the same? I mean, no Israeli leadership.
I don't
has-
think the resistance is
hasn't-
not dependent on individuals. It's not dependent on General Soleimani. It's not dependent on Sayyid Hassan Nasrallah. It's not dependent on any of the martyrs of Hamas or Hezbollah or Islamic Jihad, because this is a movement. It's an ideology. Yahya Sinwar, when he was martyred, I was on, I think probably Sky News or something, and they said, "What will happen?" I said, "Nothing. There are thousands of Yahya Sinwars."
Yeah.
And you see right now, they haven't been able to take Gaza. There's no Yahya Sinwar fighting anymore or commanding the troops, because there are others who are doing it. The same is true in Lebanon. The same is true in Iran. True Promise 3 has its own reasons. I can only speculate, but Iran wants True Promise 3 to be very, very hard-hitting. And for the last few months, the Iranians have been upgrading their missiles and drones and making them much more precise. Because, for example, if Iran wants to destroy a power plant, you can fire a few missiles and they will go down. They don't have to be very precise. But if you want to knock out that building, that small building, or destroy that particular car, you have to have very high precision. And I think next time around, when Iran does punish the Israelis, it will be very devastating for them.
And am I correct? Like an hour ago, the IRGC unveiled a new underground UAV base. I had heard that.
They were surprised. I heard in the news that they were going to inaugurate something. They have well over 300 bases.
What's the point of inaugurating these new bases? Like, what message is being
Because
sent?
they're spread out across the country.
Yeah.
And if there is an attack on Iran, you will have drones and missiles, precision drones and missiles, being fired from across the country. So there's no way to destroy those bases. There's no way to stop those drones or missiles. And if there's war, the Iranians can take down the whole region. There's no doubt about it. So they are making these underground they've developed these underground bases so that the Americans can't destroy them. They're spread out across the country. And that just makes it impossible for the Americans, or the Israelis can't do anything without the Americans. But that makes it impossible for the Americans to stop the Iranians. And they are much less expensive than Western weapons. They're very high tech, but the Iranians have devised a defensive and offensive capability without having a very high military budget.
Should Iran have a nuclear weapon to end all wars? In other words, not to deploy it, but to send the message that you can no longer threaten us. We're not going to be sacrificing so much in conventional warfare anymore.
There's a debate going on in Iran about that, and from my understanding, it's roughly 50-50 right now among ordinary people. The state, the establishment, the leader, they do not want a nuclear weapon. The reason is, one, they see it as inhumane, And so in the West, because of their narrative on Iran, they say, nonsense. But if you go back to the Iran-Iraq War, when the West was giving Saddam Hussein chemical weapons and barring Iran from purchasing gas masks.
Yeah.
My gas mask was from North Korea. So back then, leaders went to Imam Khomeini, the leader at that time, and said, we need to develop chemical weapons. And he said, no, they're inhumane. So we never produced nuclear or used and deployed chemical weapons during the war. So the ban on nuclear weapons has a history.
Yeah.
And the other reason is that if you have a nuclear weapon, then a lot of other countries would want it. And a lot of these regimes in the region, they're family dictatorships, they're not inherently stable. The
Right.
Emirates is not inherently stable.
Yeah.
Saudi Arabia, Qatar, these are family dictatorships, or Central Asian countries, or the Caucasus. So you would be pushing other countries towards developing nuclear weapons. That is a problem. But the Iranians have said that if the United States or the Israelis attack Iran's nuclear sites, then Iran will develop a nuclear weapon. That is sort of to make sure they don't do it.
Right. Right.
And
Could Iran develop a nuclear weapon after having
yes.
bunker buster bombs
Yeah.
plowing down on Fordo and Natanz?
Yes. I think the Americans are miscalculating, and they're overestimating their capabilities, and they're underestimating Iran's capabilities. Just like they underestimated Yemen. They went to destroy Yemen's underground capabilities. They couldn't. They're very well protected. All they did was bomb factories, apartment buildings,
Historic
ports,
sites.
historic sites, slaughter women and children, pretend to be slaughtering commanders. They didn't kill a single commander in Ansarullah. Not a single person.
Yeah.
Remember that the chat in
Top missile
Signal,
guy. We got the top missile guy. He's visiting his girlfriend.
He murdered a family probably, along with other families in that building. But what's the name of the top missile guy? What's his name?
Yeah.
If they have
And
the
that was
intelligence,
all-
they can give a photo and say, this is the guy.
The intelligence came from Israel. That's why they were so mad about Signalgate.
But will you ever see the New York Times raise questions about, okay, what is the identity of this guy?
Yeah.
Or any other guy? That's how it works. And when it comes to Iran, when it comes to Israel, even those who hate Trump,
Maybe we should film it.
they will still defend the interests of the Israeli regime.
Let's walk into the light if we
Sure.
could. Sorry. I guess I have two questions. I mean, Iranian society sacrificed a lot for its revolution, but how much of Iranian society today inside Iran supports the revolution in an ideological sense?
Well, there are two ways of, I think, looking at this. One is that it's none of the business of the United States. Whatever the mood is in Iran or in Iraq or in Pakistan or in India or anywhere else in the world, the internal affairs of any country is their own affairs. But even if you look at polls carried out by the Americans in Iran, the legitimacy of the state in the eyes of Iranians is very high. There's dissatisfaction. If you go in any taxi, if you go in the metro, if you go on a bus, if you get on a bus, people say whatever they want. Or you see the debate online and offline, very harsh, much more harsh than you see in the United States.
Yeah.
In the mainstream media. Much more hard-hitting. But, you will see criticism about everything from top to bottom. But at the end of the day, just as I said before, when General Soleimani was martyred, you had millions of people on the streets of Tehran, which is the most secular city in the country. It is the most, liberal and, Western-oriented city by far.
Yeah.
So this is all wishful thinking in the West. They seek to justify what they do against Iran by, saying that Iranians hate the regime and the regime. But there's always this: if all the Iranians hate the regime, as they call it, the regime, and it's falling apart and it's corrupt and it's incompetent, then why is it always a rising menace and a threat to the region and a threat to the world? Why is it so powerful and dangerous? You can't have it both ways.
Yeah.
But it's that Orientalist reservoir of knowledge that has been produced over centuries, which allows these contradictory narratives to coexist without people questioning them. It's all negative, so even though they contradict each other, but still they all seem to be true. It's both corrupt and falling apart, but it's a rising menace at the same time. And people will say, they'll nod their heads, confirming both simultaneously, because both show that Iran's somehow very bad.
Yeah, I mean, there are two kinds of nationalism in my view. There's the nationalism of the United States, which is sort of a supremacist nationalism about dominating. Many people interpret America first not as bringing America home, but actually just American primacy over anything it can take. And then you have the nationalism of states that are victims of empire, whether it's Iran, Venezuela, the part of the population of Lebanon, and that nationalism transcends politics and transcends support for the government in a lot of ways. And
and I think it's also more than nationalism. For example, Iran's sympathy for Lebanon, for Yemen, for Palestine goes beyond nationalism. It's a sense of brotherhood. It's a bond that exists. It's very interesting when you look at the Persian media in the West that beams into Iran, which is very hostile.
Yeah, Iran International.
Iran International and all the other
BBC
garbage.
Persian.
Yeah, they always say the Arabs hate you, and the Palestinians hate you in particular. And then the Arabic media, like Al Arabiya and Al Jazeera even, and all of them basically, they try to turn Arabs against Iranians in their way. So the Persian media beamed in from the West tries to turn Iranians against Arabs and Sunnis and their neighbors. And then the Arabic media, funded by these oil and gas-rich dictatorships, they try to turn the Arabs against they use the same sort of narratives against Iranians to keep people divided. But despite all that, the sympathy that Iranians have for Palestine is very high.
Yeah.
And the sacrifices Iran has made for Palestine is unique. It's unique. The Iranians have paid a heavy price for Palestine.
Yeah, it was amazing watching Al Jazeera after October 7th, and they just totally changed their tune on Shia people being slaughtered in Lebanon, for example. Suddenly it was a horrible tragedy and a crime, and Iran was the leader of the resistance axis suddenly, and that wasn't the case on Al Jazeera before October 7th. But things always come. I mean, Hezbollah was revered throughout the Arab world after 2006 when they gave Israel a bloody nose, and then they were suddenly turned into an object of hatred when they went into Syria to prevent what we see happening right now with the slaughter of minorities.
All of the Arabic media, just like the Western mainstream media, they are working in the interests of those regimes. None of them have been sincere in supporting Palestine. I mean, Qatar was supporting Saudi Arabia. Turkey was supporting Saudi Arabia during the genocidal war on Yemen. When it started, everyone was siding with the Saudis.
Yeah.
Later on, when the divisions between Qatar and the Saudis and the Emiratis emerged over different issues, did Qatar and Turkey tilt away from the genocide and began to become critical, but for their own reasons. Or, for example, right now, when the Americans started bombing Yemen again under Trump, Qatar, the Emirates, even though they're at odds with each other, and Bahrain, and the Saudis, they were all helping the Americans bomb.
And when you look at the Gulf states, whether it's Qatar, UAE, Saudi Arabia.
Or just one other thing.
Yeah.
When Iran would carry out True Promise 1 and 2, the radar stations in Turkey, in Qatar, and all these countries were being used to help Israel, Jordan. All of them were being used against Iran. Every single one of these countries. They were mobilized to help the Americans bring down Iran's drones and missiles.
You have a mosquito feasting on your blood right there.
You waited for it to
I waited for your comment to finish.
Wait for him to take my blood. Yeah, so Yeah, so it's okay. So you had all American bases across the region, whether in Turkey, whether in Jordan, whether in the Emirates, whether in Qatar, whether in Bahrain. All of them were being used to help Israel, to help them help the Americans bring down Iranian missiles and drones.
And I mean, in reality, the Americans are kind of running a protection racket there. They're saying, you host our bases, and we will defend you, and you give us your oil. And ultimately, that's not it's a colonial scenario. Do you get the sense that could change, especially when you see the U.S. proving ineffective in Yemen? Maybe they're not such a effective protector or guardian of the oil fields, and that they might actually have to, cut a deal with their neighbors in Iran.
You know this better than I. WikiLeaks shows that these regimes, some of them, they were calling for war against Iran a decade ago. They were saying, cut off the head of the snake. Now, they don't want war because they know that if there is war, these regimes will be gone, and the Americans cannot do anything about it. The balance of power has shifted. So the Americans and the Europeans can pretend all they want that Iran and the resistance, they're weak and it's a paper tiger. But the very fact that the Saudi defense minister comes to Iran and brings a message from the king, and the fact that they all send messages to Iran and they keep telling the Americans we don't want war, is because they know the balance of power has shifted. 10 years ago, that's not what they were doing. That's not what they were saying. Today, they're saying the exact opposite. The media can say all it wants in the West, but the people on the ground know exactly what's happening.
Is there any chance the U.S. pulls back under Trump?
If he knows what's good for him. The United States cannot win a war against Iran.
Yeah.
It's just not possible. And the Israelis, without the Americans, they're nothing. They're not a power. If the Americans and the Europeans pulled the plug, Israel wouldn't last for more than a few weeks. This is not a powerful regime. This is just a regime that's receiving everything the West has to offer.
Yeah, I mean, it's another thing I've noticed here, for example, touring the Aerospace Museum. Obviously, Iran's homemade air defense systems are not as advanced as the THAAD system or the Patriot battery, the most recent generation of the Patriot battery, but they're developing. But
I wouldn't be so sure.
Okay, maybe it's not obvious.
It may not be as advanced as the newest Chinese and Russian weapons, but American weapon systems are very much overrated.
Well, the point, whether or not they're more advanced or not, the point is the U.S. has had to bring 1/3 of its THAAD systems in to protect Israel.
That's right.
From missiles being fired from Yemen. Israel's totally dependent on the U.S. protective umbrella and on U.S. technology. It has no domestic industry. In fact, it's banned under the special relationship and the qualitative military edge deals that it's cut with the U.S. from developing its own platforms. Iran is at least able to develop its own platforms to defend itself.
But also, just to point out the capabilities of Iran, when Iran fired roughly, 200 missiles into Palestine, they couldn't down more than a few of them. And
the hypersonic missiles, which change angles.
Iran hasn't, I don't think Iran has actually used its hypersonic missiles. I mean, there are different definitions of hypersonic missiles. I'm not into this, so I don't want to get into it. I may be saying something wrong. But the point is that Iran has hypersonic missiles and the Americans don't. And that shows how far Iran has advanced without the sort of military cost that you see in the United States and the West. So Iran's military budget is lower than all of the countries in the Persian Gulf region. But its defense capabilities are indigenous and they're far more effective.
And so just getting back to where we are right now, which is a very vast cemetery, a display of military sacrifice, human sacrifice for a sort of transcendent political goal. How does this sacrifice historically translate into willpower today? A veteran Iranian diplomat described the negotiations with the U.S. as a test of wills. How deep is the wellspring of Iranian willpower to resist onerous U.S. demands, and like, how does it connect to what we see here?
Very deep. When the war started, a lot of these young men were just like myself, just ordinary kids. We were, doing our own things. We were like any other, teenagers in any other country. But these kids, these young men, they changed course and went to defend the country against injustice and against aggression. And their impact on Iranian society today is immense. As I said, all of these areas that we walk through, all of them, during Ramadan, during those nights that I told you about, packed at 2 in the morning, 3 in the morning.
Yeah.
And it's cold. And it was cold this year. Packed, and all these streets, full of cars. You couldn't get into this place. It has a huge impact. But if there is conflict, you will see the impact grow even further, very swiftly. That's how it was when I was young, and I have no doubt that it will mobilize the youth in a way which will be stunning to the Americans. Hopefully there won't be war. I hate war. I would like the war in Ukraine to end now. I'd like apartheid in Palestine to end today. And I'd like to see everyone live in peace. But if there is war, as I said already, the Americans will lose. The United States will lose. I have no doubt about that. Iran is not Iraq. Iran is not Afghanistan. Iran is not Libya. Iran is not Vietnam. Iran is more than all of these combined. And the Americans, the American government, elites, they believe their own propaganda, and because they believe in this exceptionalism, and a lot of it's money and the lobby, and they produce the propaganda. They believe their own propaganda often, but those who are sane and look at the situation objectively, I think they recognize that a war between Iran and the United States is not a war that the Americans can win. I'm sure there are people in the Pentagon and elsewhere who know the score.
Well, hopefully we never find out.
Hopefully.
Professor Marandi, thanks a lot.
Thank you.